Victoria Sterling moved gracefully through the bustling airport corridor, her heels clicking rhythmically against the polished marble floors. With every confident stride, she embodied the very essence of power and quiet authority. Her tailored navy blue suit, meticulously fitted and accented with subtle gold accessories, caught the golden hues of the sunset streaming softly through expansive terminal windows, giving her an almost luminous presence. Around her, the airport hummed with life. Businessmen hurriedly rushing past, clutching coffee cups and smartphones, families guiding excited children, eyes wide with anticipation toward their gates. Weary travelers sinking gratefully into seats, seeking a momentary reprieve from their journeys. Yet, amid this chaos, Victoria appeared untouched, almost serene. It was as if the bustling crowd instinctively sensed her presence, gently parting to let her pass, respecting the invisible yet unmistakable boundary she radiated. Victoria had always possessed this natural magnetism, a commanding aura carefully cultivated over years of navigating boardrooms and executive meetings, often dominated by men who were quick to underestimate her capabilities. From subtle dismissals to outright challenges, she had encountered it all. Yet each encounter only sharpened her resolve. Victoria had not merely navigated those waters, she had thrived within them, becoming a respected name in the tech world through intelligence, determination, and sheer force of will. Lost momentarily in reflection, Victoria was gently pulled back into reality by a soft chime resonating through the terminal. First-class passengers on Flight 901, you are now welcome to board. Victoria adjusted her grip on the elegantly crafted leather briefcase in her hand, each item within carefully selected, perfectly organized. Contracts meticulously drafted, presentations polished to perfection, proposals structured to anticipate every possible objection. These were the tools of her trade, instruments she wielded masterfully to shape partnerships and forge strategic alliances. As she approached the gate, Victoria handed her boarding pass to a young woman whose name tag read Amelia. Amelia offered a deferential nod, recognition and admiration evident in her eyes. Miss Sterling, your seat awaits. Have a wonderful flight. Stepping onto the jet bridge, Victoria felt a subtle shift, as though crossing a threshold not merely into the luxurious aircraft awaiting her, but into a space reserved exclusively for those who had earned their positions through dedication, sacrifice, and unwavering excellence. The first-class cabin welcomed her warmly. Dimmed lights, plush upholstery, and the inviting quiet promised a rare moment of solace and comfort, a reprieve from her demanding professional life. She moved gracefully down the aisle toward seat 1A, her preferred choice, strategically positioned to ensure privacy and peace. Settling into the plush leather seat, Victoria allowed herself a small sigh of relief. The luxurious upholstery seemed to embrace her gently, each thread, each carefully crafted detail symbolizing the countless challenges she'd faced and overcome to reach this moment. Victoria gently placed her briefcase beneath the seat in front of her, adjusted her posture comfortably, and glanced out the oval window beside her. The sun was now nearly hidden behind distant clouds, leaving behind a sky transitioning gracefully into hues of deep violet and soothing pastel pink. The serene beauty felt almost overwhelming, yet comforting, a visual metaphor for her own life's journey. Years of intense struggles, like fiery sunsets, were now transitioning into calm, rewarding peace, a hard-earned tranquility. Just as she felt the tension easing from her shoulders, a soft but unexpected voice broke her reverie. "Victoria? Victoria Sterling, is that really you?" Victoria turned slightly, instantly recognizing the voice before even seeing the face clearly. Approaching down the aisle was a woman whose eyes sparkled with surprise and genuine warmth, a woman Victoria had not seen in years. Emily Carter, a close friend and confidant from her earliest professional days, before their lives had taken different paths. A rare, genuine smile spread across Victoria's lips, a warmth filling her heart at this unexpected reunion. "Emily," Victoria greeted her warmly, standing gracefully to meet her old friend. "It's been far too long." Emily embraced her tightly, whispering softly with a hint of pride in her voice. "I've followed your journey closely. You're inspiring, Victoria, truly." Pulling back gently, Victoria's eyes shone with sincere appreciation. Yet even as she embraced this moment of unexpected warmth and connection, a subtle, uncomfortable sensation prickled at the back of her mind, as though fate itself was gently reminding her to remain vigilant. Because the peaceful moments she'd carefully carved out for herself were often fleeting, and the challenges she would soon face might prove far greater than she'd anticipated. Settling back into her seat, Victoria allowed herself another glance out the window, watching thoughtfully as twilight enveloped the horizon. Though the path ahead remained uncertain, her resolve was unwavering. Whatever lay ahead, she would face it with the same dignity, strength, and quiet determination that had carried her this far. In this moment, as the aircraft's engines began their comforting hum and the first-class cabin slowly prepared for departure, Victoria Sterling allowed herself to lean gently back into the plush leather seat, savoring this rare pause amid her demanding life. Her gaze drifted thoughtfully toward the small oval window beside her, the fading twilight casting soft purple shadows across her elegant features. Here, in the gentle isolation of seat ton A, Victoria reflected on the long journey she'd traveled to reach this precise moment. She understood well that success was not viewed uniformly. Some admired it openly, others with quiet skepticism or even envy. Yet Victoria had learned early in her career never to let external judgments define her sense of worth. Her position today, reflected in the soft leather of her seat and the refined surroundings, symbolized more than wealth or status. It represented courage, resilience, and countless battles fought quietly and gracefully behind closed doors, each victory forging the person she had become. Her thoughts drifted gently to the negotiations awaiting her tomorrow, a billion-dollar deal poised to reshape Sterling tech dynamics forever. Though externally serene, Victoria carried immense pressure beneath her calm demeanor, knowing how much depended on her precise decisions and confident leadership. Yet, at least for now, as the aircraft gently taxied toward the runway, she allowed herself the rare luxury of tranquility, a brief reprieve from the relentless demands of her professional life. Glancing once more toward the fading horizon, where vibrant streaks of pink and purple melted softly into twilight, Victoria felt a reassuring calmness envelop her. She silently acknowledged the struggles of her past nights, spent awake, tirelessly strategizing, persistently fighting through bias and prejudice to claim her rightful place in an industry dominated by men. Each victory had felt like this moment, quietly triumphant yet tempered with an awareness that battles still lay ahead. But just as Victoria prepared to fully immerse herself into peaceful contemplation, her quiet refuge was abruptly shattered by a harsh voice slicing through the gentle murmur of the cabin. Startled from her reflections, Victoria glanced slowly up from the documents resting neatly on her lap, turning her attention toward the approaching disturbance. Two women strode down the aisle, their posture rigid, radiating entitlement so palpable it drew immediate, uneasy glances from every passenger. Leading the pair was Rebecca Kensington, tall and impeccably dressed, her expensive jewelry glittering ostentatiously beneath the cabin lights. She moved confidently, as though the universe itself owed her a debt, while her companion, Sophia Hartwell, trailed behind. Her expression distinctly uncomfortable, as if aware of a pending confrontation. Rebecca halted abruptly beside seat 10A, glaring down at Victoria with icy disdain. Her carefully manicured eyebrows arched dramatically, lips curling into a contemptuous sneer as she turned pointedly toward Sophia, loudly enough for everyone nearby to overhear. "Really, Sophia? It seems they'll allow just about anyone into first class nowadays," she declared mockingly, her voice deliberately raised. "Standards have truly dropped." Sophia visibly winced at Rebecca's abrasive tone, quickly averting her gaze, clearly embarrassed yet unwilling to speak out. Rebecca, empowered by her companion's silence, leaned forward slightly, directing her contemptuous glare squarely at Victoria. "Excuse me," she snapped, her voice filled with derisive incredulity, "but I believe you're occupying my seat. Seat 1A has always been mine, reserved for the airline's most prestigious customers. Perhaps there's been a mix-up. Someone of your background couldn't possibly belong in first class? Economy class is toward the back, dear." Her words hung heavy with undisguised disdain, intended not merely to humiliate but to publicly question Victoria's right to occupy her rightful place. A tense silence descended over the cabin. Passengers exchanged furtive glances, their murmured conversations halted by Rebecca's brazen display of arrogance. Several travelers suddenly retrieved their phones, sensing the uncomfortable scene escalating into something significant. Victoria Sterling remained calm, though within her chest a familiar anger simmered quietly, reignited by the blatant prejudice in Rebecca's voice. This wasn't her first encounter with such attitudes. She had faced countless similar confrontations in boardrooms, conference halls, and exclusive events, each encounter sharpening her resolve. Without betraying even a flicker of irritation, Victoria calmly placed the document she'd been reviewing down onto her lap and folded her hands gently. She looked directly into Rebecca's challenging gaze, her eyes steady, her expression composed, yet carrying an unmistakable authority. "I assure you there has been no mistake," Victoria spoke softly yet firmly, her voice resonating clearly throughout the cabin, capturing the attention of every passenger nearby. "This seat, seat 1, is mine. I booked it weeks in advance, paid in full, and I have every intention of remaining right here." Rebecca's eyes widened briefly in shock at Victoria's calm yet assertive response, clearly unused to resistance, before narrowing once again into cold anger. "You expect me to believe that someone like you booked this seat legitimately?" she demanded incredulously, raising her voice further to draw even more attention. "Do you even realize who you're speaking to? This seat belongs to me. I've flown this airline more times than I can count. I'm one of their top-tier VIP members. You, however, are a nobody. You clearly got this seat by mistake, or worse, some kind of misguided affirmative action." Several passengers openly gasped at the blatant prejudice in Rebecca's statement. Others began discreetly pulling out their phones, sensing that this confrontation was about to escalate further. Sophia shifted uncomfortably, visibly embarrassed by her friend's behavior, yet still unable to intervene. Victoria, however, remained utterly unmoved, her poise unshakable. A faint, knowing smile emerged on her lips as she addressed Rebecca again, this time her voice clear and distinctly audible to the passengers nearby. "It seems you misunderstood me," Victoria stated calmly but firmly, eyes unwaveringly locked onto Rebecca's angry glare. "Your assumptions about who belongs here and who doesn't reveal far more about you than about me. Let me assure you I belong precisely where I sit, having earned every bit of it through dedication and hard work. If you have doubts, perhaps you should consult the manifest or airline staff. I'm certain they'll clear up any confusion you have." Rebecca, momentarily stunned into silence by Victoria's composed yet authoritative words, flushed red with mounting rage. Her voice trembled with barely restrained fury. "You have no idea who you're dealing with. I promise. You'll regret this arrogance." Victoria calmly met Rebecca's glare without flinching. She knew precisely how to handle individuals who relied on entitlement and intimidation. With measured words and unshakable dignity, Victoria quietly responded, "Your threats and tantrums may have worked elsewhere, Ms. Kensington, but they hold no power over me. This seat, and the respect owed to every paying passenger, is mine by right, not privilege. You chose the wrong woman to intimidate." A hush settled across the cabin, broken only by the quiet murmurs of passengers now openly recording every detail of the exchange. Victoria Sterling, still elegantly composed, leaned back into her seat, calmly and confidently awaiting whatever came next. In the tense silence, footsteps approached hurriedly down the aisle, signaling that the airline crew had noticed the disruption. Yet even as the approaching staff neared, Victoria's heart remained calm and resolute. She was fully prepared for whatever might unfold next, ready to assert not only her own dignity, but also that of every person who had ever faced such unjust prejudice. This wasn't just a battle over a first-class seat. It had become a fight for justice itself, one that Victoria was more than prepared to win. Yet despite Rebecca's mounting hostility, Victoria Sterling remained perfectly composed, her poise unshaken. She held Rebecca's fiery gaze steadily, her own eyes clear and unwavering. An eloquent expression of quiet power forged from countless trials and battles she'd fought and won. Victoria had faced down rivals far more formidable than this woman before her, and she was determined not to let prejudice and entitlement disrupt a moment she had rightfully earned. "I've already explained myself clearly," Victoria responded again, her voice level yet firm, each word articulated with absolute precision. "This seat belongs to me, and I have no intention of moving. Your insults won't change facts or alter reality." Rebecca's face twisted sharply, disbelief turning swiftly to rage. Unaccustomed to being contradicted, especially publicly, her composure dissolved, revealing raw anger beneath the carefully constructed facade. Taking another confrontational step forward, Rebecca practically trembled with indignation, her voice rising to an uncomfortable volume, filling the first-class cabin and capturing the attention of every passenger aboard. "You'll regret speaking to me this way," Rebecca shouted, her face now flushed crimson with fury. "Someone like you, presuming you belong here, treating me as if we're equals? I promise you, I'll see you removed. Immediately." The silence in the cabin deepened painfully, punctuated only by the occasional sharp intake of breath or whispered disbelief from other passengers, some openly shaking their heads at Rebecca's shocking behavior. Several discreetly recorded the confrontation on their phones, knowing they were witnessing something significant unfolding before their eyes. Victoria remained impressively calm. Her poised exterior gave no indication of the turmoil beneath. She had entered this flight anticipating peace, a rare luxury amid an exhausting schedule of high-stakes negotiations. Instead, she was thrust into a battle that represented far more than a personal inconvenience. It symbolized the same biases she'd spent her entire career battling. "My arrogance," Victoria echoed softly, her voice carrying quietly through the cabin, capturing everyone's attention without needing to raise her tone. "I find it ironic that you accuse me of arrogance while you're openly demanding I relinquish a seat I've booked and paid for, simply because you believe your status grants you superiority. That entitlement, Ms. Kensington, is precisely what's arrogant here, not my refusal to surrender my rightful place." A subtle wave of murmured approval moved through nearby passengers. Rebecca's eyes flickered momentarily, sensing that public sentiment was quickly turning against her, but pride prevented her from backing down. Her face flushed crimson, her gaze frantically scanning the cabin, desperate to reclaim control. "You're making a serious mistake," Rebecca hissed, her voice trembling with anger. "I promise, you'll regret crossing me." Victoria tilted her head very slightly, an understated smile forming at the corners of her lips, one filled not with malice but with quiet confidence and clarity. "On the contrary," she replied softly yet firmly, "I know exactly whom I'm dealing with, someone accustomed to privilege insulating her from consequences. Unfortunately for you, I'm not intimidated easily. If you insist on escalating this further, I assure you I'll handle it decisively." Rebecca's cheeks flushed a deeper crimson, rage and embarrassment mingling openly on her features. She seemed momentarily paralyzed by Victoria's unexpected calm strength, clearly unused to dealing with someone who refused to submit to her bullying tactics. Her frustration visibly mounted, intensifying the discomfort rippling throughout the cabin. At precisely this tense moment, rapid footsteps approached down the aisle, signaling the arrival of cabin crew. But instead of relief, Victoria sensed a subtle tightening in her chest, a faint apprehension that this confrontation was about to escalate in an entirely new direction. A flight attendant approached briskly, her crisp uniform impeccable, her name tag clearly reading Miranda Covington. The attendant's eyes moved immediately toward Rebecca Kensington with recognition, and to Victoria's quiet unease, Miranda's expression shifted instantly from neutral professionalism to barely concealed bias. "Is there an issue here, Miss Kensington?" Miranda asked, her voice professional yet noticeably deferential to Rebecca. Without even waiting for Rebecca's reply, Miranda turned toward Victoria, a skeptical expression forming on her face. The shift was swift and unmistakable. Victoria's presence in seat 2A had suddenly become the object of suspicion, not legitimacy. Rebecca took immediate advantage of Miranda's biased tone, emboldened once again. "Yes," Rebecca announced haughtily, "there certainly is an issue. This woman claims seat 1A belongs to her when everyone knows it has always been mine. She clearly doesn't belong here, and I'd appreciate your help removing her immediately." Miranda's eyes narrowed with suspicion as she turned fully toward Victoria, her voice harsh and demanding. "Ma'am, I'll need to see your boarding pass. There must have been a mistake. This seat is reserved for our VIP passengers. Clearly, someone of your status wouldn't normally occupy it." Several passengers gasped audibly at the blatant prejudice implicit in Miranda's accusation. Victoria could sense the mounting tension, the collective anger of passengers witnessing this injustice unfolding before their eyes. Her pulse quickened briefly, but her outward composure remained unchanged. Without flinching, Victoria reached calmly into her briefcase, removed her clearly printed boarding pass and handed it gently yet deliberately toward Miranda. "Here you are, my boarding pass, seat assignment clearly indicated," she said softly, her voice calm and controlled. "Feel free to verify it thoroughly if you wish." Miranda snatched the boarding pass roughly, her eyes flickering anxiously over the printed text. A brief look of confusion crossed her face. Clearly there was no actual discrepancy, but then she shook her head stubbornly, determined to validate her prejudice somehow. "Something's not right here," Miranda muttered loudly, shaking her head dismissively. "This boarding pass must have been printed by mistake. I'll need you to vacate this seat immediately and move to the economy section until we can clarify this error." The cabin erupted in louder murmurs of disbelief. Passengers who had remained quietly uncomfortable were now openly expressing outrage, shocked at Miranda's blatant favoritism and bias. A woman in the seat behind Victoria whispered sharply, "This is unacceptable," while a man nearby pulled out his phone, openly recording the injustice unfolding before him. Victoria, however, remained absolutely calm. Her heart was steady, her voice remained gentle yet firm, resolute as she spoke clearly for all to hear. "I'm afraid you've misunderstood. I purchased and reserved this seat legitimately. If you're truly convinced there's an error, I suggest you confirm it with your supervisor immediately. But I assure you I will not be moving." Miranda's face flushed with irritation, clearly unused to having her authority questioned. Rebecca stood nearby, looking both triumphant yet subtly anxious, as passengers increasingly turned against her and Miranda, their whispers now openly hostile. A sudden voice broke the silence from further back in the cabin. A firm male voice filled with authority, deep and resonant. "She's absolutely right. Check your manifest carefully, because your behavior is becoming unacceptable." Heads turned swiftly toward the voice, and Victoria found herself recognizing the distinguished older man sitting several rows behind her. Someone she knew instantly from recent headlines. It was Senator Jonathan Gates, a prominent figure well known for championing equality and social justice. His authoritative intervention added weight to Victoria's stance, visibly shifting the balance of power within the cabin. Miranda's expression faltered slightly, suddenly unsure. Rebecca's confidence wavered visibly, clearly caught off guard by this unexpected intervention. The tide of public sympathy had decisively turned, and Victoria Sterling remained seated firmly, empowered by the palpable support now radiating from the passengers around her. With calm, determined eyes, Victoria watched Miranda hesitate, sensing the shift of power within the cabin. This confrontation was far from over, but for Victoria, the battle lines were clear. She would not yield, not today, not ever. Her dignity, earned through a lifetime of resilience, was never negotiable, no matter who stood against her. A ripple of shock moved through the first-class cabin, a tangible tension spreading swiftly among the passengers, their murmurs growing louder, expressions ranging from quiet indignation to outright disbelief. Even Sophia Hartwell, who had remained quietly by Rebecca Kensington's side, now shifted uneasily, visibly uncomfortable. Her eyes darted nervously between Rebecca's flushed, enraged face and Victoria's composed, unwavering expression, realizing with growing embarrassment that the situation had spiraled rapidly out of control. Victoria remained seated firmly in her plush leather seat, her posture dignified and her eyes steady, refusing to give in to the mounting pressure Rebecca so aggressively exerted. She allowed herself a brief moment of internal frustration. She had expected peace, a rare respite from the relentless demands of her professional life. Instead, she now found herself once again forced to defend her worth, challenged openly by prejudice masquerading as privilege. Yet outwardly, Victoria showed no sign of turmoil. When she finally spoke, her voice resonated calmly but firmly throughout the cabin, commanding respect and attention without needing to rise above a quiet, measured tone. "I booked this seat well in advance, just as every other first-class passenger here has done," Victoria explained once more, her voice clear, steady, and unwavering. "Your insistence otherwise will not change reality. If there is any confusion, I suggest you check the manifest carefully, but rest assured, I will not move." Miranda Covington, visibly irritated by Victoria's quiet confidence and clearly unaccustomed to passengers refusing her instructions, seemed to bristle even further. With stubborn defiance etched across her features, Miranda shifted her stance, casting a protective, almost reverential glance toward Rebecca, then quickly returning her narrowed eyes toward Victoria, openly suspicious. "This airline values customer loyalty highly," Miranda snapped, her tone now revealing more than mere favoritism, betraying an undercurrent of prejudice. "Miss Kensington is one of our VIP passengers, someone who consistently occupies this seat. It traditionally belongs to her. So please," she continued sharply, her voice dropping to a forced politeness that was clearly artificial, "vacate this seat immediately to avoid creating further disruption for everyone on board." Gasps of disbelief were audible across the first-class cabin. Passengers openly shook their heads, aghast at the blatant unfairness and obvious bias the flight attendant displayed, yet no one intervened directly. Not yet. Several passengers discreetly retrieved their smartphones, sensing clearly that what they were witnessing was more than a simple misunderstanding. It had rapidly become a clear act of injustice. Victoria felt a brief flash of frustration deep within, though she carefully kept her features calm, betraying nothing. She had faced far greater obstacles than an arrogant passenger and biased attendant, yet she was genuinely disappointed that after all she had accomplished, she still found herself forced to justify her rightful place, fighting battles she had long ago believed she had overcome. Drawing a slow, deliberate breath, Victoria addressed Miranda again, her voice firm but controlled. "Your loyalty program, regardless of how valued certain customers are, does not grant rights to seats already legitimately booked by other passengers. My boarding pass is completely valid. If you doubt this, I strongly suggest you confirm it with your supervisor. Immediately." Miranda visibly bristled at Victoria's refusal to back down, her face tightening with irritation and embarrassment. Clearly unaccustomed to passengers pushing back against her authority, she visibly struggled to maintain her composure. "You're causing unnecessary disruption," Miranda retorted sharply, leaning closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper filled with barely concealed anger. "If you continue refusing to cooperate, I will have security remove you from this flight. Move voluntarily, or I will escalate the matter." Around them, murmurs of shock turned quickly into open displeasure, rippling outward among the passengers. Sophia Hartwell stepped back even further, distancing herself subtly from Rebecca as whispers around her grew louder, tinged with disbelief at Miranda's audacity. Even Sophia, though aligned with Rebecca socially, clearly recognized this blatant discrimination and appeared mortified to be associated with it. Victoria remained resolutely unmoved. Her voice grew colder, more authoritative, each word precise, crafted to carry beyond just Miranda and Rebecca, reaching everyone within earshot. "If you genuinely believe I'm occupying this seat unjustly," Victoria responded softly yet clearly, "then you need to escalate this immediately. Bring your supervisor or whoever else is necessary, but understand clearly, I will not move simply because you prefer to accommodate another passenger's sense of entitlement. Respect and dignity are not negotiable." The power of her words reverberated through the cabin, prompting subtle nods of agreement from nearby passengers, who now felt emboldened by her quiet strength. Miranda's face flushed darkly, anger warring with discomfort, unaccustomed to her authority being openly challenged. Yet sensing the rising tide of opposition, she hesitated slightly, aware that her next move would be closely watched and recorded. Frustrated, Miranda turned sharply away, muttering bitterly under her breath as she retreated hastily toward the front of the aircraft, presumably to summon reinforcement. Rebecca Kensington remained momentarily stunned, her cheeks burning red with humiliation and anger, disbelief plainly etched on her face that anyone, especially someone she viewed as beneath her, would dare openly defy her demands. Victoria sat back calmly, quietly regathering her thoughts and dignity. She felt a gentle warmth of reassurance as several passengers began openly whispering words of support, subtle nods and encouraging glances reinforcing the quiet solidarity forming around her. The man seated directly across the aisle nodded solemnly at her, murmuring softly yet distinctly, "Don't." Victoria met his eyes with gentle gratitude, a soft smile of acknowledgement playing briefly across her lips. "Thank you," she replied simply, sincerity evident in her voice. Her resolve deepened further, knowing clearly that this confrontation had evolved beyond merely defending her seat. It had become a statement about human dignity, respect, and fairness. Rebecca, meanwhile, paced impatiently nearby, face flushed with anger and humiliation. Sophia, clearly uncomfortable with her companion's aggressive behavior, gently touched Rebecca's arm, whispering urgently, "Rebecca, let it go. People are watching. This isn't worth it." But Rebecca shook off Sophia's cautionary hand furiously, her pride wounded far too deeply to retreat. Her eyes, narrowed and fierce, locked on to Victoria once more, silently promising that this confrontation was far from over. Victoria Sterling, however, simply sat composed, refusing to be intimidated or bullied. She had faced challenges far greater than this in her climb to the top, and she knew intimately how battles for respect and dignity unfolded. She understood the risks of standing her ground, but she also knew precisely why it was necessary. And as the whispers around her grew louder, filled with growing anger and disbelief at Rebecca and Miranda's behavior, Victoria calmly adjusted her posture once again, steeling herself for the confrontation she knew would come next. She had not asked for this fight, but now that it had found her, Victoria Sterling was more than ready to confront it head-on and prevail. Caroline approached Victoria cautiously, her expression carefully neutral but failing to mask her deep discomfort. It was clear to everyone watching that she wished to resolve the confrontation quickly, even if that meant sidestepping the uncomfortable truth that lingered in the air. Her gaze flickered anxiously between Victoria's calm, determined face and Rebecca Kensington's furious glare, clearly torn between the demands of fairness and appeasing a privileged passenger. "As Sterling," Caroline began slowly, forcing a professional smile that barely disguised the unease in her voice, "I sincerely apologize for the inconvenience this has caused. However, in the interest of resolving this matter smoothly, might I suggest you temporarily move to another seat? I assure you we'll thoroughly investigate and resolve the issue after we land." Victoria tilted her head slightly, her calm expression unchanged, her eyes focused squarely on Caroline's face. She felt a slight flare of anger, not at Caroline personally, but at the dismissive injustice behind her words. Yet, when Victoria spoke, her tone remained calm, dignified, carrying a quiet yet powerful intensity. "Ms. Whitmore, with all due respect," Victoria said clearly, each word deliberate and commanding, "this is far more than just an inconvenience. I booked and paid for this seat weeks in advance. The disruption has come entirely from Ms. Kensington's unfounded sense of entitlement and your flight attendant's refusal to verify the facts. Moving would imply that her privilege is more important than my legitimate rights as a customer. I refuse to accept that." Caroline visibly faltered, clearly unprepared for Victoria's direct yet graceful assertion. She had clearly expected Victoria, like so many other passengers, to quietly comply in the interest of peace. Instead, Victoria stood her ground with absolute conviction, her calm resolve amplifying the tension inside the cabin. Caroline hesitated briefly, her cheeks flushing slightly under the mounting pressure. "Miss Sterling," she began again, her voice firmer but tinged with anxiety, "please reconsider. Ms. Kensington is one of our most loyal VIP passengers. A small accommodation from you would greatly assist in avoiding any further escalation." At Caroline's statement, murmurs erupted loudly among the passengers. Open disapproval filled the cabin as they exchanged disbelieving glances, shocked at her open acknowledgement of favoritism. An older woman behind Victoria muttered indignantly to her companion, clearly audible to those nearby. Did she really just ask this woman to give up her seat because another passenger thinks she's superior? Rebecca Kensington, emboldened by Caroline's hesitation, stepped forward angrily, her voice laced with frustration. "Are you seriously tolerating this nonsense? I demand she be removed immediately. How dare she disrespect me this way?" Victoria didn't flinch at Rebecca's rage. Instead, she met Caroline's increasingly anxious gaze, calmly ignoring Rebecca's tantrum entirely. Victoria's voice remained steady, powerful, and controlled, each word chosen with precision. "Miss Whitmore, this isn't a request for cooperation. You're asking me to surrender my dignity and accept blatant prejudice. If you insist on continuing this path, rest assured, this will go far beyond your airline. I suggest you immediately involve someone who can handle this fairly." Caroline visibly paled at Victoria's implied reference to potential corporate consequences. Clearly unnerved, she glanced nervously between Rebecca, who stood with arms defiantly crossed, and Victoria, who sat poised and unwavering. Passengers around them openly began filming with their phones, recognizing clearly the gravity of what was unfolding. I'll speak with corporate immediately," Caroline stammered finally, her voice shaking slightly under the weight of the escalating conflict. "Please remain seated while we address this." She retreated quickly toward the cockpit, leaving Victoria and Rebecca in tense silence. Rebecca leaned slightly forward, her voice dripping with venom as she hissed bitterly at Victoria. "You'll regret this humiliation, I promise you." Victoria simply returned Rebecca's gaze with unflinching calm, a quiet, confident smile faintly appearing at the corners of her lips. Her expression made one thing clear: she was unshaken, fully prepared to confront whatever followed next. Victoria had faced down more formidable adversaries in boardrooms, in meetings, in negotiations with billion-dollar stakes. Rebecca Kensington's threats meant little compared to battles already won. As silence momentarily enveloped the cabin, passengers began openly voicing their displeasure, emboldened by Victoria's composed defiance. A distinguished-looking older gentleman leaned forward slightly from his seat across the aisle, addressing Victoria with quiet sincerity, loud enough for others to hear clearly. "Don't let them intimidate you. You're entirely right." Victoria graciously inclined her head, acknowledging his support with gentle appreciation. She felt a subtle shift in the cabin's mood as others began quietly speaking out, murmuring their agreement, openly disgusted by Rebecca and Miranda's behavior. Phones were now openly raised, capturing the confrontation, spreading awareness beyond just this cabin, ensuring accountability would come swiftly. Moments later, Caroline returned, visibly flustered, accompanied by a new figure, a tall, authoritative woman carrying a tablet clearly displaying the official manifest. As they approached, Victoria felt an unexpected wave of satisfaction ripple through her. She knew this battle wasn't simply about her seat. It represented the fight she'd waged her entire career against unfair treatment, prejudice, and entitlement. "M. Sterling?" the authoritative woman said clearly, offering a polite but professional nod of acknowledgement. "I'm Eleanor Blake, Director of Passenger Relations. Allow me to personally apologize for how this situation has been handled. Your seat assignment 1A is completely valid and was booked well in advance. There's no question about it." At these words, Rebecca Kensington recoiled in shock and anger, her confident mask crumbling visibly. "That's impossible," she snapped, disbelief clouding her expression. "Do you even realize who I am?" Eleanor Blake's eyes narrowed slightly, her tone firm and unequivocal. "Ms. Kensington, your status with our airline does not supersede another passenger's rights. I assure you we'll discuss your behavior separately and at length, but for now your behavior is unacceptable. Please return to your assigned seat immediately, or I will have security remove you from the aircraft." Rebecca's cheeks flushed crimson with humiliation, her mouth opening to protest, but Eleanor's gaze silenced her instantly. The surrounding passengers openly applauded softly, satisfied that justice had finally prevailed. Eleanor then turned back to Victoria, her expression sincerely apologetic. "Miss Sterling, on behalf of the entire airline, I apologize deeply for the disrespect and prejudice you've experienced today. Rest assured, there will be immediate repercussions and policy changes to ensure this never happens again. Thank you for standing your ground." Victoria nodded graciously, finally allowing herself to relax slightly, her heart filled with quiet triumph and gratitude for the solidarity shown around her. Passengers around her offered approving smiles, nodding respectfully in her direction, acknowledging her quiet strength and courage. Yet, as the tension slowly dispersed and the flight prepared again for takeoff, Victoria remained reflective. She knew her actions had resonated far beyond her personal situation. This moment had become a powerful statement, a clear affirmation that dignity, fairness, and equality were never negotiable. As the cabin quieted, Victoria allowed herself a gentle breath of satisfaction. She had fought countless battles in her life, overcoming barriers and prejudices many considered impossible. Today, she had won another, not merely for herself, but for every person who'd ever been unfairly challenged. And as the plane smoothly prepared once again for departure, Victoria Sterling knew with unwavering certainty she belonged exactly where she sat, and nothing, neither prejudice, nor privilege, nor intimidation, could ever move her again. Rebecca Kensington, unable to contain her frustration any longer, stood directly in front of Victoria's seat, fists tightly clenched at her sides, her refined features twisted into an ugly mask of rage. Gone entirely was her carefully constructed facade of elegance and sophistication. Now, only unbridled fury remained, visible to every person watching in stunned silence. "You think you're special just because you managed to buy yourself a first-class ticket?" Rebecca sneered venomously, her voice rising sharply, trembling with barely controlled anger. "Allow me to remind you, someone like you clearly doesn't belong here. I don't care how you got this seat. You're utterly out of your place." Her accusation hung heavily in the cabin, thick with blatant prejudice. Rebecca cast a sharp glance around, seeking validation, support, some shred of justification from fellow passengers. But she was met instead with a wall of shocked silence, uncomfortable avoidance of eye contact, and disapproving whispers. Rebecca's arrogance had left her completely isolated. Undeterred, her voice rose even higher, shrill with indignation. "I've been a loyal VIP of this airline for years. I earned my place in this cabin. How dare you think you can waltz in here and pretend to be my equal? It's obvious this seat was some sort of charity, special treatment for someone who doesn't deserve it. I will not allow it." Gasps rippled throughout the passengers. Open disgust registered on their faces, heads shaking in disbelief. A young woman seated nearby murmured incredulously to her companion, "Did she seriously just say that?" Her partner quickly pulled out his phone, silently capturing the entire shameful spectacle unfolding. Victoria's heartbeat quickened slightly, anger quietly surging beneath her serene exterior. Yet, outwardly, she remained utterly poised, betraying nothing. Throughout her life, she had confronted such prejudice countless times, in corporate boardrooms, conferences, even casual interactions. Always met with those who presumed their privilege was unassailable. Though the insult stung deeply, Victoria's strength lay in her ability to remain composed, refusing to grant Rebecca the satisfaction of provoking a visible reaction. Rebecca, sensing the crowd's disapproval yet unwilling to back down, turned sharply and spotted Miranda Covington returning alongside Caroline Whitmore. Miranda stepped forward aggressively, her designer attire impeccable, but her expression twisted in anger, mirroring Rebecca's own. Her voice joined the confrontation, dripping with contempt as she addressed the gathered crew and passengers. "This is absurd. Do you even know who we are?" Miranda shouted furiously, pointing an accusing, perfectly manicured finger toward Victoria. "How dare you allow someone of her kind to disrespect loyal, elite customers? We deserve better treatment. She clearly doesn't belong in this cabin." Passengers now visibly recoiled, openly bristling at the blatant prejudice being voiced so arrogantly. Phones emerged openly, recording every moment of Miranda and Rebecca's increasingly shocking display. Miranda, ignoring their disapproval, continued defiantly, directing her aggressions squarely at the hesitant cabin crew. "If you don't remove her immediately, I promise there will be consequences. Call security now, or none of you will ever serve another flight again. I have connections. I assure you, this isn't an idle threat." Caroline Whitmore visibly faltered, deeply conflicted between the escalating demands of the two privileged passengers and the palpable outrage now saturating the cabin. She glanced helplessly toward Victoria, silently hoping for some sign of compromise. Victoria, however, met her wavering gaze firmly, her expression clearly conveying that compromise on her dignity was impossible. Miranda stepped even closer, emboldened by Caroline's indecision. Her words grew even uglier, openly prejudiced now, all pretenses of civility stripped away. "Just look at her. You honestly believe she belongs in first class? This airline used to have standards. Remove her immediately. This is an insult to all of us." Her hateful declaration shattered whatever thin veil of decorum remained. Gasps filled the cabin, turning swiftly into outright anger. A distinguished older woman seated nearby finally had enough and spoke out loudly, her voice sharp with indignation. "How dare you speak this way? She has every right to sit there." Yet, despite the escalating chaos around her, Victoria stood up slowly, elegantly, moving with a deliberate grace that immediately captured everyone's attention. Her presence radiated quiet authority, a stark contrast to Miranda and Rebecca's hysterical hostility. Victoria's eyes locked unwaveringly onto Caroline Whitmore, silently demanding the supervisor finally demonstrate true leadership and integrity. But Caroline was overwhelmed, visibly intimidated by the brewing conflict. She weakly turned toward Victoria, her voice soft, almost pleading. "Miss Sterling, perhaps it would be simpler if—" "No," Victoria's voice interrupted softly but firmly, instantly silencing Caroline. "Let me be very clear, this seat is mine. I have endured insults and prejudices today no passenger should ever tolerate. Your duty is to enforce fairness and safety, not to appease passengers who feel their privilege excuses them from basic human decency." Caroline froze, speechless. Victoria turned deliberately toward Miranda and Rebecca, whose defiant expressions now wavered visibly under her powerful gaze. "If you truly wish to involve security, do it now. But understand clearly, this injustice will not go unanswered. Your actions have consequences beyond this cabin. I will ensure accountability." Miranda's face paled, confidence quickly giving way to panic. Rebecca's eyes widened, momentarily stunned by Victoria's unwavering determination. Passengers murmured louder, their whispers growing into open applause and cheers of support for Victoria. One man boldly stood, addressing Caroline directly. "This is absolutely unacceptable. Ms. Sterling is completely justified in standing her ground. She shouldn't move an inch." Approval echoed through the cabin. Caroline took an involuntary step backward, finally recognizing how severely she'd misjudged the situation. Her eyes darted nervously, realizing too late the magnitude of her error. Victoria remained standing, calmly yet resolutely. Her voice was quiet but carried clearly, unmistakable authority resonating in every carefully chosen word. "Either address this properly, or I assure you this airline will face repercussions far beyond today. Respect is non-negotiable." Rebecca, sensing her defeat yet furious at her public humiliation, shouted once more, her voice trembling with rage and embarrassment. "This isn't over. You'll regret embarrassing me. Mark my words." But Victoria only met Rebecca's glare with calm determination, a subtle, confident smile flickering across her lips. The silent strength in her gaze conveyed clearly that she felt no fear, no intimidation, only absolute confidence in the justice of her position. Passengers openly applauded Victoria now, murmuring words of encouragement. Phones continued filming, ensuring this encounter's consequences would reach far beyond the aircraft. Victoria gently inclined her head in appreciation, quietly grateful for their support. She sat down slowly, reclaiming her seat firmly, dignified. Victoria Sterling understood deeply that today's battle wasn't merely over one seat. It was a profound symbol of dignity, respect, and equality. She had faced such prejudice countless times, always standing firm, never yielding. Today would be no exception. And as she calmly reclaimed her place, Victoria knew with absolute certainty she had won far more than just this argument. She had shown everyone on board that respect and dignity were rights worth defending, no matter the cost. Victoria Sterling's gaze remained steady, a quiet, confident smile gradually forming on her lips. She knew deeply that standing firm against prejudice and entitlement was never a cause for embarrassment. Rather, it was a demonstration of profound strength. Around her, passengers continued recording every second of the dramatic confrontation, their phones capturing undeniable evidence that would resonate far beyond this airplane, turning Victoria's private moment of courage into a powerful public statement against discrimination. Miranda Covington, still standing defiantly in the aisle, her eyes flashing with arrogant fury, shouted angrily again, her voice trembling with indignation. "If you refuse to move, I swear I'll have airport security personally escort you off this plane." Just as the tension seemed poised to escalate further, a new voice, authoritative, commanding, and surprisingly calm, suddenly cut through the charged atmosphere of the cabin. "That won't be necessary." Every head in the first-class cabin turned instantly toward the source of the voice. Standing tall in the doorway was Jeffrey Collins, senior executive representative of the airline, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal gray suit, exuding unmistakable authority and professionalism. Behind him stood two uniformed airport security officers, their silent, disciplined presence immediately quelling Miranda's escalating threats. Jeffrey Collins swiftly scanned the cabin, his expression tightening with quiet anger as he took in the scene. His gaze settled first on Victoria Sterling, recognition flickering across his features, quickly followed by genuine surprise and immediate respect. He then turned his attention sharply toward Miranda Covington and Caroline Whitmore, both of whom visibly tensed under his penetrating scrutiny. Without hesitation, Jeffrey stepped confidently forward, instantly diffusing Miranda's aggressive stance. Addressing Victoria first, his voice softened, respectful and deeply apologetic. "Ms. Sterling, allow me to personally offer my sincerest apologies for the unacceptable treatment you've endured. Please give me a moment to resolve this matter properly." Victoria inclined her head gracefully, acknowledging him with quiet dignity. Her unwavering composure stood in stark contrast to Miranda's anger, Rebecca's arrogance, and Caroline's clear nervousness. Jeffrey turned next toward Caroline Whitmore, his gaze hardening immediately. His voice carried a steely edge of controlled disappointment and authority. "Ms. Whitmore, kindly explain to me exactly why Ms. Sterling has been treated in such a disgraceful manner." Caroline shifted uneasily, visibly struggling under the weight of his scrutiny. She cast a helpless glance toward Miranda and Rebecca, her voice faltering with hesitation. "Sir, there was confusion regarding the seating arrangements. Ms. Kensington insisted—" Jeffrey raised his hand sharply, cutting her off mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed dangerously, each word deliberate and firm. "Confusion? Did you at any point confirm the manifest or check passenger details before making this judgment? Or did you simply assume who appeared entitled enough to occupy this seat?" Caroline opened her mouth, but no words emerged. Her silence spoke volumes, resonating through the cabin as passengers watched intently, their phones openly capturing every second of this critical exchange. Jeffrey Collins stepped closer, his voice dropping lower but carrying unmistakable clarity and authority. "Let me make something abundantly clear. This airline does not and will never tolerate prejudice or discrimination. Your handling of this incident today has embarrassed both yourself and this company. You should be deeply ashamed." He then turned deliberately toward Miranda Covington, whose confident arrogance had evaporated entirely, replaced with fear and humiliation. Miranda averted her gaze, trembling visibly beneath his stern presence. "And you, Miss Covington," Jeffrey continued steadily, his tone calm yet unyielding, "allowed your personal biases and blatant favoritism to override your professional judgment. You openly threatened a passenger simply for asserting her legitimate rights. Your actions are utterly unacceptable." Miranda attempted a feeble response, her voice shaking. I was merely attempting to resolve—" "You were escalating a situation rooted entirely in discrimination," Jeffrey interrupted firmly, his voice uncompromising. "Effective immediately, consider yourself suspended pending a thorough investigation. Security will now escort you from this aircraft." Miranda's face drained of color, her arrogant posture collapsing instantly. She barely resisted as the two security officers calmly stepped forward, gently yet firmly guiding her toward the exit, her departure observed by a silent, watchful cabin. Rebecca Kensington, still standing near Victoria, her eyes blazing with a volatile mix of anger and humiliation, suddenly erupted again, her voice shrill with defiance. "This is outrageous. Do you have any idea who I am? I demand better treatment. I've flown this airline for years. I deserve—" Jeffrey pivoted sharply, silencing Rebecca instantly with a look of icy, unyielding resolve. His voice, when he spoke, resonated with absolute authority. "Miss Kensington, loyalty to this airline does not grant you permission to humiliate or discriminate against another passenger. Your behavior today violates the very foundation of our company's principles. Effective immediately, you are permanently banned from flying with this airline. Security, remove Ms. Kensington from this aircraft now." Rebecca's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. "You can't seriously—" "I assure you, I can and I have," Jeffrey replied coldly, his words precise, unwavering. "Furthermore, this incident will be thoroughly documented and reported to other airlines. Perhaps next time you will reconsider before openly mistreating another passenger, based solely on your misplaced sense of entitlement." Passengers openly applauded, murmuring approval, relief, and satisfaction clearly audible. Victoria, seated calmly, felt a deep and quiet satisfaction, not from Rebecca's humiliation, but from witnessing justice finally prevail. Justice she had long fought for and deserved. Jeffrey turned once more toward Victoria, his demeanor softening respectfully. "Miss Sterling, once again, please accept my profound apologies for this disgraceful incident. You have my assurance this airline will take immediate action to rectify our policies and procedures, ensuring no passenger experiences such prejudice again." Victoria met his eyes graciously, her voice calm yet resonant with quiet strength. "Thank you, Mr. Collins. Real accountability is essential. My hope is that today's events serve as a catalyst for meaningful, lasting change." Jeffrey nodded solemnly, clearly understanding the deeper significance of her words. Passengers around them expressed approval, some quietly thanking Victoria, others openly recording every second, aware they had witnessed something profoundly significant. More than a mere confrontation, this had become a powerful moment, advocating dignity, fairness, and equality. Rebecca and Miranda, their pride shattered, were quietly escorted from the aircraft, their arrogance fully exposed and rebuked. Caroline Whitmore remained pale and silent, realizing the consequences she would face for allowing the injustice to escalate unchecked. As Jeffrey stepped away momentarily to speak with the remaining crew, Victoria relaxed back into seat 1A. She glanced thoughtfully around the cabin, feeling not only a sense of vindication but profound gratitude for the quiet solidarity that had emerged among the passengers. They had witnessed a critical lesson unfold, that dignity and respect were not negotiable privileges but fundamental rights to be fiercely defended. Outside the aircraft, the sun had finally set, the sky now filled with hues of deep violet and indigo, stars beginning to glisten gently in the darkness. Victoria Sterling sat silently, reflecting deeply on the confrontation she'd just endured. Today, she had once again stood firm, not merely for herself but for everyone who had ever faced unfair judgment or prejudice. She knew this moment would ripple far beyond the confines of this aircraft. With a quiet, determined smile, Victoria gently adjusted her posture, her resolve unbroken. She had faced prejudice and entitlement countless times throughout her career and had always prevailed through strength, dignity, and unshakable integrity. Today had been no different, and she knew deep within that this victory was far greater than just her own. Passengers throughout the cabin openly applauded, their relief palpable and satisfaction evident as Rebecca Kensington, face flushed crimson with embarrassment and anger, was escorted toward the aircraft door by security. Her furious voice sputtered threats and promises of repercussions, but those words faded rapidly, silenced decisively as the cabin door closed behind her, leaving behind only a quiet, powerful sense of vindication among the watching travelers. Jeffrey Collins turned back slowly, his authoritative gaze settling firmly upon Caroline Whitmore. His expression hardened, a mixture of stern disappointment and undeniable anger. The tension was tangible as he spoke, his voice steady yet unforgiving, each word carrying a weight of responsibility. Ms. Whitmore, your handling of this incident has been profoundly troubling. I expect supervisors on our airline to uphold fairness, equality, and professionalism, principles you have failed spectacularly to demonstrate today. You prioritized placating prejudice and entitlement over safeguarding the dignity of a paying passenger. Caroline's face turned ashen, her confident demeanor collapsing under his words. Her eyes filled with shame, clearly recognizing the depth of her failure. She opened her mouth as if to speak, to offer some defense, but no words came. She knew there was no justification to be found, only the stark truth of her complicity. Jeffrey's voice grew sharper, resolute with authority. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your position pending a complete review. Security will now escort you from this aircraft. Caroline nodded weakly, her eyes filled with tears of regret and shame. Her humiliation was clear as she quietly allowed the security officers to guide her toward the exit. Her eyes briefly met Victoria's as she passed by, offering a fleeting look of deep, unspoken apology. But it was too little, far too late. The passengers watched silently, their expressions a blend of vindication and quiet satisfaction, as Caroline Whitmore joined Miranda Covington and Rebecca Kensington in being escorted from the aircraft. Jeffrey Collins turned slowly back toward Victoria Sterling, his expression genuinely remorseful, clearly disturbed by the failure of his staff and the injustice Victoria had endured. He stepped forward respectfully, carefully approaching her seat. His voice softened, sincere and respectful. Miss Sterling, please accept my deepest apologies on behalf of this airline for the inexcusable disrespect and prejudice you experienced today. I assure you such behavior goes against everything we stand for, and it will not be tolerated. Victoria finally allowed herself to relax slightly, meeting his gaze with a dignified but gracious nod. Thank you, Mr. Collins, she responded calmly, her voice soft but carrying unmistakable authority. I appreciate your prompt intervention, but please understand, this incident must serve as a clear message. Respect and dignity are fundamental rights, never privileges that can be selectively granted or withheld. Your airline has a duty, not only to me, but to all passengers, to ensure they're never treated as I was today. Jeffrey nodded solemnly, clearly deeply moved by the quiet strength and dignity Victoria maintained, even after enduring such humiliation. You have my absolute assurance, Miss Sterling. Today will mark a critical turning point for our airline. Policies and training will be immediately reviewed and revised to prevent anything like this from happening again. Outside the window, the sky had darkened to deep violet, stars beginning to glitter gently against the approaching night. Victoria watched thoughtfully, the peaceful scene outside a gentle reflection of her own renewed calm. She knew clearly that battles still awaited, challenges, negotiations, corporate struggles, but in this quiet moment, she felt reassured that her determination had meaningfully changed the dynamic around her. And as the plane lifted smoothly into the evening sky, Victoria closed her eyes briefly, savoring the quiet triumph, deeply grateful for the unwavering support from her fellow passengers, knowing with absolute certainty that justice, dignity, and strength had undeniably prevailed. Passengers throughout the cabin openly applauded, relief and genuine satisfaction evident on their faces, as Rebecca Kensington, red-faced and sputtering incoherent threats, was escorted toward the aircraft door by security. Her voice faded gradually into angry protests, finally silenced when the cabin door closed decisively behind her, cutting off any remaining sounds of entitlement and arrogance. Once the trio had departed, Jeffrey Collins turned back to Victoria Sterling, visibly troubled by the entire episode. He approached carefully, his demeanor one of genuine remorse and humility, offering a sincere nod of contrition as he spoke softly but clearly. Miss Sterling, allow me to apologize again for the unacceptable way you were treated today. Such behavior is completely at odds with our airline's core values, and I deeply regret the humiliation you experienced. Victoria raised her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze with calm authority, her voice carrying the quiet strength that had defined her throughout the ordeal. I appreciate your sincerity, Mr. Collins. However, please understand mere apologies are insufficient. True justice requires meaningful action. I trust this experience will lead to substantial and lasting change. Jeffrey nodded solemnly, clearly understanding the gravity behind her words. You have my absolute assurance that we will take immediate and thorough action. This incident has already prompted a complete review of our internal policies and procedures. Staff training will be immediately revised to ensure that every passenger receives fair, respectful treatment, regardless of background or status. Victoria's expression softened slightly, a quiet sense of satisfaction shining briefly in her eyes. Good. Accountability and transparency are essential for genuine progress. Let today serve as a clear message, not just for your airline, but for all who witnessed this, that dignity, respect, and fairness must never be negotiable. Around them, the first-class passengers murmured quiet yet firm agreement, nodding emphatically in Victoria's direction. Jeffrey Collins turned briefly toward the rest of the cabin, his voice carrying resolutely as he addressed them. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once more for your patience during this troubling situation. Please rest assured the incident you witnessed today is entirely unacceptable to our airline's standards and ethics. Immediate corrective measures will be taken, not only to address the individuals responsible, but also to prevent anything like this from ever occurring again. Your experience today will become the catalyst for real change. A spontaneous and enthusiastic wave of applause erupted throughout the cabin, signaling approval and appreciation for Jeffrey's clear and decisive action. Victoria felt a quiet, profound satisfaction settle within her, as the acknowledgement resonated deeply among the passengers. As Jeffrey stepped away, passengers turned openly toward Victoria, expressing their heartfelt gratitude and admiration. The woman seated 2 rows behind leaned forward once more, her voice carrying genuine warmth as she spoke sincerely. Miss Sterling, I must say again how deeply your courage has inspired all of us. The grace with which you stood your ground today was incredible. Victoria smiled warmly, genuinely touched. Thank you. Today wasn't just about my seat. It was about all of us. We should never allow disrespect to pass unchecked. A man across the aisle added fervently, Your dignity under pressure was remarkable. You've reminded us all that real strength is quiet but powerful. We'll carry your example forward. Victoria smiled again, genuinely moved. In these words, she recognized something more significant than admiration. She saw an awakening. People around her were inspired not merely by her success, but by her strength of character, integrity, and refusal to yield to injustice. She leaned back comfortably as the plane's engines hummed once again, signaling imminent takeoff. Outside, darkness had gently descended, the stars softly illuminating the vast night sky. Their quiet brilliance reminded Victoria that even amid moments of darkness, there was always hope, a guiding light of courage and integrity to lead the way forward. Jeffrey Collins returned once more, briefly handing Victoria a sealed envelope. His eyes conveyed deep sincerity as he quietly said, Inside you'll find a formal assurance that we're implementing immediate policy reforms, mandatory training, and stricter oversight. You've ensured this incident will become a pivotal moment of reflection and growth for our entire airline. Thank you again for holding us accountable. Victoria accepted the envelope gracefully, offering Jeffrey a reassuring nod. I appreciate your commitment to accountability, Mr. Collins. Genuine change begins with acknowledgement, but it endures through meaningful action. Settling deeper into her seat, Victoria reopened her leather briefcase, returning to the documents awaiting her attention. Yet now her focus felt clearer, her spirit buoyed by the strength and solidarity of those around her. As the plane soared steadily through the night sky, she reflected thoughtfully on the broader significance of what had transpired. Today had tested her resolve, challenged her deeply, but it had also affirmed her belief in the importance of speaking up against injustice, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been judged unfairly. In that quiet, reflective moment, Victoria Sterling knew that the incident aboard this plane had accomplished far more than simply ensuring her rightful place in Seat 2A. It had set a powerful example, creating ripples of inspiration and empowerment that would reach countless others, encouraging them to stand tall and unwavering in defense of their own dignity and respect. And as the aircraft lifted smoothly into the darkened sky, stars twinkling gently outside her window, Victoria closed her eyes momentarily, savoring the profound satisfaction of a meaningful victory. Today's events, though difficult, had reaffirmed her belief that true power lies not in arrogance or entitlement, but in quiet, dignified strength, unwavering in its pursuit of fairness and justice. Opening her eyes again, Victoria smiled softly, returning once more to her work, calm yet determined, fully aware that the battles ahead, both corporate and personal, would continue to test her resilience. Yet now, bolstered by the powerful support of everyone she had inspired, Victoria felt more ready than ever to face them. Tonight marked not merely the end of a difficult incident, but the beginning of a powerful new chapter, one defined clearly and unmistakably by dignity, respect, and unwavering courage.